Hello, my name is Hope Caetta, and for my food service management final, I have interviewed Chef Brian Evans from On the Rise, a bread bakery in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, and have asked him a few questions about how he tends to manage his restaurant. The first question I asked him was, "What do you look for when hiring a new employee?" To which he responded, "Trainability is important, how willing they are to learn. Even experienced bakers are constantly learning. I also look to see if they can remain calm and improvise well. During an interview, I'll throw in some of those technical 'how do you bake this' questions in the middle of those segments where we're talking about generic 'why do you want to work here' type questions. See if they get flustered or if they can manage to make it through the question." The second thing I asked him is there anything you look for in entry-level candidates versus higher-leveled ones? He said, "For an entry-level position, I like to see a lot of passion and a good amount of knowledge. I understand that they're not going to be as skilled as a more experienced person, but they should have some idea of how a bakery functions and how bread works. The speed will come with practice. In a higher-level position, I want to see them being confident. Someone who can take charge when necessary, but also function independently. Having little fear of getting burned is a plus. But that doesn't mean I want to hire someone reckless, you know? Are there any times of day or year that people become harder to work with? Specific holidays or what have you?" He says that summer can get pretty bad here. Not only is it hot outside, but with the oven also anywhere between 420 to 500 degrees, and it's running all day. Couple that with the building having an entirely glass front that happens to face the sun. It gets hot quickly, and the heat tends to make people crabby. When it gets like that, I like to make sure that everyone has cold drinks. Possible, let people go outside for a minute or two when they have like a small break to cool off. The most important thing I can do is to keep the mood light and keep the morale high. Thursday evening and Friday mornings can also be a little hectic because a lot of the people who live out here in Cleveland Heights are Jewish. So they're all coming to buy challah on Fridays, so we need to add that to the production schedule alongside everything else, which can cause stress for some of my employees sometimes. How long do you spend training employees? I'm always looking for my employees to be learning, but in terms of basic job training, it can go anywhere from 10 days for the more experienced employees to more closer to a month for less experienced employees and entry-level positions. How much experience do you want someone to have when applying for any given position? For entry-level positions, I'm looking for more of any kind of experience, in most anyway. I don't want someone who just watched, like, the Great British Bake Off to come here and think that's how a real bakery functions. If I get an application with no experience, I probably won't interview them. And the amount of experience I look for scales with about someone who, if they started here from an entry level, would take to work up to that position. So, usually between 2 to 4 years. How willing are you to give people days off around the holidays? I would obviously prefer to have them here, but I tell people that while I schedule first come, first serve, I want to give those with families, especially families with young children, the first opportunity. About half my employees are Jewish and the other half are not, so specific dates don't tend to be a problem. It's just that entire season where we're usually down a worker or two. But we're closed on, like, Christmas and the actual holiday dates, so conflict tends to stay relatively low. When employees come in conflict with each other, what steps do you take? It depends on what the conflict is. Usually I will try to move employees out back as soon as I see a fight break out. The kitchen is open to the serving counter and sitting areas, and many people bring young children here. I would hate to have On the Rise be the place where they learn their swear words. Most problems aren't very big. Someone burned loaves that they were supposed to be watching while the oven guy went to the bathroom. Or whatever. In which case, they usually just need a few minutes to cool off and it's fine. Sometimes I have to send one of them home, but by the time they come back the next day, everything's over and no one even talks about it. It's usually when someone has a personal problem that it can become more hazardous. I can only think of about 4 times that's happened while I've been the head here. It's usually just someone's having trouble at home and they bring their bad attitude to work, so they can be incredibly snappish and start fights over really small things. I have to remind them, often several times, not to bring their home problems to work. After a few weeks, when the problem's settled, they generally tend to return to normal. How do you treat somebody if they have to be fired or laid off? If someone has to be laid off, I try to tell them gently. Try to give them a heads up a few weeks before and give them time to find a new job. And most people take this relatively well. It's when people need to be fired for usually bad reasons that things get hairy. When I see poor behavior arise, I'll alert the employee that continuing to do so will result in them getting fired. I keep reports on the exact numbers of times this has to happen, in case we go to court or whatever, because you never know. If the behavior continues, I have to be stricter and harsher on the person when I let them go versus them being laid off. Fortunately, most people leave voluntarily around here, and I'm glad a majority of the partings I've had to do have been positive ones. Thanks for paying attention for 7 minutes. Or not, I don't know. I can't guarantee you watched this video, but yay! We passed the class.